Hi, my name is Carlos Gutierrez. I'm the executive director of Cinema Tropical, and I want to welcome you to this very special conversation as we celebrate the 20th anniversary of Cinema Tropical. And we have a very special guest who's been very close to Cinema Tropical in many ways. Please welcome director Matías Piñeiro. Matías, great pleasure.
Hi, hello, Carlos. I hear you're in New York.
As you can tell, yeah.
I hear you're in New York. Yeah, that's brings a lot of memories. I'm in Portugal now, in Porto, writing a little bit. Quite happy with that. But I'll be back in New York quite soon, so we'll be able.
Let me do the official introduction. Matías was born
Please.
in Buenos Aires, Argentina in 1982. He earned a filmmaking degree from Universidad del Cine, and his award-winning films have been screened around the world, including Locarno, London, New York, Vienna, and institutions such as the Museum of Modern Art, Film at Lincoln Center, el Museo de Arte Latinoamericano de Buenos Aires, el MALBA, Harvard Film Archive, and Anthology Film Archives, to name a few. In 2007, he made his debut feature film, The Stolen Man, El Hombre Robado, followed by Todos Mienten, They All Lie, in 2009. And he has spent the last decade working on a series of films focusing on Shakespeare's female characters in comedies. Rosalinda, 2010, Viola, 2012, which, by the way, won the Cinematographical Award for Best Film that year. The Princess of France, La Princesa de Francia, from 2014, Hermia and Elena, from 2016, and more recently Isabella from 2020, which will be released in the US theaters this August by Cinema Guild. And his newest short film, Sicorax, which he co-directed with Luis Patiño from Spain, has just been announced as a selection of this year's directors for night section at Cannes. Matías also teaches film at the Pratt Institute in New York City, at Le Fresnoy in France, and the Elias Tejereta Cine Escola in San Sebastian, as well as being a curator for the Punto de Vista Film Festival in Pamplona, and also we fellow programmer of a series, if you can screen it there, at Anthology Film Markets, which has been on hold for more than a year now.
Yeah, we have to come back. I keep on thinking about that. I have so many movies that I want to screen, and well, we will come back. We'll come back anytime soon.
We're just waiting for Anthology to reopen, and now the list of films that we want to show is growing.
Yeah.
So let's go from the beginning. When did you know that you wanted to be a filmmaker, and that you when you decided to study film?
At first, I wanted to be a critic. I think that I was a little bit attached to the awards and the ceremonies and the things that you see like in mass media and the things that you see in theaters and my first approach was very simple. It was the one that I could see in TV, like a big attachment to TV. That then with years I got fed up, So sometimes you have to leave your kid to do whatever he or she or they want, so that they get sick of that. So I think that that's what happened to me. I got sick of all that first approach to cinema. That was the one that I was like reading mostly in the newspapers and on TV. And all of a sudden, because of a weird connection, that I had to do an exam, an English exam, these sort of certificates. I had to read Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca. And so all of a sudden I was in a blockbuster back then, and all of a sudden I researched that there was a film, Rebecca, and it was directed by Alfred Hitchcock. That I remember that as a kid on a Friday night they were showing The Birds when I was very young at my grandparents' house, but I didn't have any sort of connection. But in that in blockbuster, Hitchcock had a full wall. It was the only person that had a wall. And that somehow attracted me. The idea that, all of a sudden it's not only the premieres, it's not only the films that opened this last month, but all of a sudden there's this thing, and I don't know why there's a corner for this person. So I got interested in that. And I have a little bit of an obsessive thing that I like to cross out things, So I started watching all the films that were there. So it was from watching, this connection with English, and with watching movies, and that connected me to cinema, and that put me to think that I could be a critic or something like that. But then in Argentina, there was not that that field, no, like academic field, and so I went to filmmaking. So I studied filmmaking, and that's how I started. I went to Universidad del Cine, that is that at that time was producing a few films, and I was going to the cinema always. I was watching many films. I remember going with my mother to see Silvia Prieto, for instance, and like watching it and say, "Oh, this is interesting," you know. But I was, I don't know, like 16, 17, and then I started seeing that there were some films that were associated with this film school. So I said, okay, let's go to this film school. I tried to get into the national because I didn't have enough money to afford the private school. So I tried to enter into the national public school, but I didn't. I failed. And so I went to the private, thanks to my mother, and that did a big effort in order for me to be in that place. And that's how it started. At the end, what started actually was also that in that film school, in Universidad del Cine, I was also learning another way of making movies. That is the way that I make my movies today. That is very alternative. It's finding like an alternative to narrative, an alternative to production, and somehow understanding that production and narrative and the discipline of making a movie are connected. You know, that mise en scène and production are connected. So that's how, in a few sentences, that's how it started.
And how was the experience of studying at the Universidad del Cine?
It was very good. It was a place for, I am very grateful to that institution, because it still helps me, you know, to make films, and it's a place where you can go back. You know, if you are taken down, if you are broken, you can always go back. And if you need to finish a movie, they will try to help you. So it's a very interesting relationship that they have with the alumni. And so I cherish that bond a lot. And so that's why every time that I have an opportunity, I show my appreciation, because if it wouldn't be for them, I wouldn't be the filmmaker that I am. And I enjoy the filmmaking that I'm producing with the people that I work with. So I'm very grateful. I met there like colleagues, and then I met there like maestros, you know, like people that were very inspiring. I had a teacher from also I had a teacher, Mariano Chinaz, but also I made acquaintances there with Alejo Moishansky, and I also was colleague to Alejandro Fadel, Laura Chitarella, Santiago Mitre, many people, many different people, and I'm forgetting a lot of others, of course. Sure. And there I also cultivated my cinephilia. I was doing the film club there, and like a lot of events inside. Like the university was very, very warm to have students not working, but helping to develop things like the Talent Campus or the Film Festival of Short Films. Like a lot of activities that were beyond like the academic circle. So it was a great expansive experience. And then I became a professor there. So that made another sort of relationship, like a way of earning money also through cinema in a different way. So that liberated me from making other things with moving images and being reflective and being able to think cinema and produce cinema and make, everything interconnected. I don't know, Melanie Shapiro is my producer, and she's a producer of many films, but we met in film school. And then it's interesting how there's no hierarchies. The hierarchies are somehow broken. Those who were younger then become your peers, and then and those who were older will also become your peers. It was a very good experience, and it's a continuing experience, I could say.
So it seems to really have a big impact, because we're going to talk about some of the names and some of the things that you just mentioned. Just before we talk about that and your work in particularly, you mentioned Silvia Prieto, watching with your mom. What was the influence of that, what was called the new Argentinian cinema in your formation years?
Yeah, I was unaware of it when I watched it. I went to the cinema because I was watching all the things that show. I was crossing out every Thursday. There were 2 or 5 films being screened, and I was going there to watch them all. So in that, I could see my friend Polly and Silvia Prieto or Jurassic Park 2. You know, I was watching everything. But I remember that it left me an impression, and I was sharing a lot with my mother at that point, no, like a typical relationship of going with your mom to the cinema, being like the teenager that I was. And it was an experience. I remember watching that and seeing not fully like in another. They put my body in another position. You know, I was feeling things differently, and I was attracted to that without knowing exactly what it was. And then when I went into film school, I went back to watch it and see that there was another way of making films in Argentina. You know, and there's many, and an interesting thing that it's not only one way of making a movie. No, so that idea of an alternative was what Rehman for me was very important. You have the poster back there.
Yeah.
Yes, because it's very important for Cinema Tropical as well, that movie.
Yeah, it was actually the first film that we screened, Cinema Tropical, and we've actually distributed that basically all of Martin's films. So yeah, no, Martin has been such a influential figure for.
Yes.
And actually, we also had a conversation with him. He was the first guest in the series. So
nice.
So it's good to make the connection. So you graduated from Universidad del Cine, and how do you make El Hombre Robado, Stolen Man?
The Hombre Robado, Stolen Man. It was a short film. In film school, I was never chosen to make there were so many students that not everyone could make a film. So you had to do a contest, you submitted your script. And I was always runner-up, always. So I never shot. So there was a moment where I was a little bit like tired of that situation. And I decided to go with a friend to ask to see what I want to shoot. It's been like 3 years. I want to shoot, and I was there with a whole idea of like something that was not working properly. I was going to complain, and very quickly, Manuel Antin, the director and the founder of the film school, told me, "Okay, when do you want to shoot?" And for me, it was such a weird, like all of a sudden, I was there to complain, and somehow he provided a solution that was just understanding cinema as something that can flow, that's something that can happen, that's something that there is an alternative. So I wrote this script, and it was like an in the off circuit of the film school in that sense. And then I did a short film, and I was working with Alejo Moishansky, that was the editor, that he's also a filmmaker and a great editor as well. And we saw that the short film was not working. And I remember very clearly the day. I remember that it was weird how Maria Villar, that is the actor that I usually work with, it was weird how her character went from A to B so quickly. It was weird. There was no development. There was no path. So the fact was that it was not A and B. It was A and M. And in the middle, there were a lot of letters missing, a lot of beats missing. So I remember one night with Alejo, we took a page, and we saw, okay, these scenes are working. The thing is that you need more scenes in order to see how the character develops and evolves. And so let's make another meeting between Maria and Romina. Let's make another meeting between Julia and Romina. And so we did in that little paper, that must be somewhere, like a scheme of the movie. So when I had the scheme, we said, okay, I think that you have a feature here. Because it's not just, because at first it was kind of disappointing to say, the short film is bad. So, and then I see that it's not that with shooting 1 or 2 shots, it's okay. No, you need to shoot a lot. And that's hard, because you are thinking that you have something, but then all of a sudden it became an opportunity to make a film. So we went back to the film school and said that this was the situation, and they helped us to produce the film all through 1 year. So I went out to shoot, and I started this relationship with shooting that is the very same one that I had with Isabella, like 15 years later. This idea of writing, shooting, editing, writing, shooting, editing, writing, shooting, and editing, like in the studio era, like that they were writing and shooting, then things, they were watching the rushes, they were not working, they were shooting again. And so it's a very alternative way of shooting, but also sometimes I play with this idea that it's also like the most industrialist of the, you know, that, or at least that the studio era had that thing of the, of not, of keeping yourself in a state of shooting, I say, you know, that not just, sometimes I make this metaphor of filmmakers nowadays becoming like lazy athletes. We talk about how to jump, but we don't, we just talk and we have cocktails and we have meetings with people and we talk about like gravity and how high the thing is and how the muscles should be, but we don't jump. We just go to the Olympics, that would be the shooting. We just go right to the Olympics. No, but our legs are a little bit fluffy and our knees are a little bit like rigid because we only have talked, we only have written and pitch, you know? And look for money. And so the idea of keeping yourself in a state of shooting is something that I cherish, you know, and that because you cannot, it's like, I'm not that sort of person that thinks that with one take it's enough, you know, that with one roll of dice is not enough. I don't think of terms of genius. I think of terms of work and process. I cherish that. So if you just give me 1 week to shoot, of course I'm not going to shoot everything good or adequate to what I need, you know? I will need like a time to see, to review, to do this, to do that. And certain schemes, like more industrialist schemes, don't allow you to do that, you know? I don't know if...
Do you know any other filmmakers that work that way?
Yeah, there's a lot, but well, actually, Mariano Ginás works that way, Laura Chitarella works that way, Eloisa Solas work that way. There's many, and experimental like Jessica Sarah Ringland works that way. There's a lot. It's more alternative, but it's also true that I've been more connected with those people than with the people that are more from the industry. I actually don't know much about the industry in that sense. I always have made my films in a sort of like a theater group, you know, like an independent theater group. And actually, I have learned a lot. I think that this has been a conversation with Mariano Ginás and Alejo Moishansky about that. There's a Argentine independent cinema from the last 10 years or 15 years have learned a lot from the off circuit of theater. Those actors like Esteban Lamote, Stan Bigliardi, Pilar Gamboa, Romina Paula, Agustina Muñoz, and many others are coming from the off circuit, and nowadays they work in like bigger productions, or they produce their own films, or they do, they have expanded, and I think that from 15 years ago that was not happening. No, that was not particularly the case, or not like centrally the case. But now, okay, many things have happened, like more people are making movies, things are more open, it's cheaper to make a movie. So there's a lot of alternatives.
We're going to talk more about theater in particular and some of the names that you mentioned. With your following film, Todos Mienten, They All Lie, that's when you started to kind of developing this more closer connection with literature. And in that case, combining, and it was also interesting that in your first film that you already have basically the team that you all continue to work for all these years, or some people have accompanied you since the very first film.
Yes.
And then with this second film, so you take it, you make a closer connection with literature and cinema. So I'm really intrigued about that connection, which then you explore in your much more stronger in your other films, or where that came from, and particularly with Domingo Faustino Sarmiento's writing.
Yeah. So. At that point, I was attending like classes in the public University of Literature, and I was very interested by discovering certain texts from this very important literary and political figure that is Sarmiento, that is a sort of Franklin in a way. It's not easy to compare people, but and I was very attracted to some texts that for me were more obscure, and they were from their younger years. That for me, that period is much more interesting. Then he becomes a much more conservative, and I'm less interested in that. But for instance, like his in They All Lie, there is this connection with the trips, the travel that he did to Europe and to Africa and to the US. And for me, I think that it's a way to avoid the blank page. I think that using going towards literature, going towards theater, allows me not to be alone, allows me not to think cinema like in a bubble. I don't have that much imagination. I just give me a few things and I do something, you know? It's not that I can start thinking my film from nowhere, from an empty case. No, I need to work with something. And cinema is a very interdisciplinary discipline. So it's what these sources, I need like, I don't know if I would be a sculptor, I wouldn't know how to make a sculpture. I would just like give me the materials and I would do something that would like that, and we would say that that's a sculpture. With cinema, it's the same. I take these elements that I'm attracted to, that I'm like usually like kind of surprised or like in a sort of amazement that doesn't know, like a desire to know more, like a learning, like cinema, like a learning experience for me. You know, that I'm not an expert in Shakespeare, I'm not an expert in Sarmiento, I'm not an expert in Sappho, but there is something that attracts me, like a sort of abyss that makes me want to question and learn more about this by making movies, you know? And so then these words dynamize the thing. So I knew that they were going to read the text and think about this, and I would take this idea of the tree and the national history and here and there, make like a sort of fable, like a kind of absurd fable that They All Lie is. It's a strange little machinery, very a kind of obscure and full of holes, and again absurd. I wanted to make a film that was complex with many layers, with a lot of holes, a little bit distant as well. I wanted to practice something different from my previous film. I'm always relating my new film to the previous one. My films are always reacting one to the other. And so if Maria was running all around the city in The Stolen Man, in They All Lie, she would be in the country, like in a small house in the countryside, paralyzed. And those are little challenges that and let's see how I can frame that, how I can make fiction with it, how can I do something, you know, how the machinery of fiction is still active. How can I make that keep on working?
So how do you make the connection? So how do you make the jump from Sarmiento to Shakespeare, from They All Lie to Rosalinda?
Because this is somehow funny. There was, when I made They All Lie, I was not interested in other texts by Sarmiento. Maybe Argyropolis, it was another text that I was interested in. But then the other ones I was not. And I remember, like, after Abafisi, this film festival in Buenos Aires that was so important back then for me, like, you know, it was very important because it was the place where you could like screen your little movie, you know. It's not only that you could make your movie, that you could also show it, so in a big cinema. So that was super important. And then Malva would allow you to keep on showing. So that was like a trinity of that help independent sets and independent cinema. But then I remember that when I was showing in Bafisi, They All Lie, a filmmaker that I know this person, but it's not like a close friend, but it's Marco Berger, that you might know.
Sure.
And he came to me very friendly, he's super friendly, and he said, "Oh, you should do Midsummer's Night Dream." And I was like, what is he saying? And I couldn't care less about Shakespeare back then, but there was some, because he talked something about like how much they talk and they think of comedy. He had like a few, and that somehow planted a seed in me. And when I was doing They All Lie, I was reading Shakespeare, but because I wanted to do the opposite, I wanted They All Lie to be, how do you say, kind of distant, and like fragmented and kind of modernist. And so I said, okay, let's read the opposite. And I thought that Shakespeare would be the opposite. That now I would say that I don't know if it's the opposite, but I was reading it and I was surprised by the comedies. I was surprised by finding these women that nobody have talked to me about. You know, I was surprised by, again, there's an element of surprise. I have never read the Trips of Sarmiento. Nobody talked to me about how he was writing, like how he was putting sentences one next to the other. And I was attracted to that. And then with Shakespeare, it was this character, especially Rosalind in As You Like It. And I was lucky enough in order to receive an email from Jeonju International Film Festival in South Korea that gave me money to make a movie. That was never the case with me. I was always finding the money myself, saving my own money, making films in very brief time, you know, like very independently. But I was very, very, very lucky to be part of the Janjo Digital project. And so they gave me money to make a movie. So I made it, and I had to respond quickly. So I was having Shakespeare in my head. I was working with Maria and with Alberto Ajaca and with Agustina Muñoz, and so we made this, and that's how it started. And I remember that when I was making the film in Del Tigre, that is this part of the river where it's like a delta. No, it is a delta. I remember that I had to write like a little director statement for Rosalinda, and I said, "Oh, I'm shooting. I cannot write a director statement well." and I remember that it was then when I realized, oh, this could be the beginning of something. And I actually put there, oh, and I'm going to make the next one about 12 Nights. And it was like a big lie. It was a huge lie. When I wrote it, it was a huge lie. It was just being like,
todos mienten.
Exactly, Matías miente. Matías particularly miente. And then it was manifested, you know. So and I got attracted to that, and now I'm finishing that cycle. You know, I think that with the Tempest now that you mentioned, Sycorax, that is this short film that we did with Alois Patiño, that is this friend of mine, and we're going to do Ariel, that it's another take on Tempest. I'm closing this cycle because I'm not much attracted to the other plays, which are great and whatever, but other people might do. I don't know what to do with Much Ado About Nothing, for instance. So I won't. There's no need for me to keep on doing. And I think that I did enough, and I can pass to, and all of a sudden a new interest came into me, and I'm focusing on that. That is Sappho. Now I'm interested in Sappho. I'm going even like further away.
Oh, wow. Let's talk about what you were mentioning, the theater company. You know, for many years, particularly probably when you started your career, there was a big trend in filmmakers and younger generations of working with non-actors, and just still continues to up to this day to a certain degree. But you know, but since the beginning, you decided no, I want to work with actors, and actually I want to work with the same actors. Yes. And you've been working with basically the same actors all these years, which is also amazing. And I found very interesting what you were saying about the influence of theater with cinema, which doesn't really happen necessarily in other parts of the world. It seems like the film world is very isolated from other arts to a certain degree, particularly in the U.S. More so than in Latin America, of course. So I'm really interested about that connection with theater and with this particular group of actors. You know, you mentioned Maria Villar, Romina Paula, Agustina Muñoz, Laura Paredes, Elisa Carcajo. It's a pretty impressive group of actors.
They're amazing. They are the ones that are good. You know, they're the ones that make the thing possible. If it would only be my writing about like relationships and so on, the movies would be very flat. If it would be only about Shakespeare, the movies would be a little bit rigid and academic. But it's because they are in the middle that all this thing gets mixed, and I think that something of a little bit more interest appears. I think that there's something that one time I read in a magazine in Mexico. How's the name of that magazine in Mexico? It's like Bionica, like a film magazine. Bionica.
Icónica, no?
Icónica. There was an interview with Lucrecia Martel, and she said at one point that she was thinking about new Argentine cinema, the one from '99, you know, the one like with Rehman, Martin, Pablo Trapero, and herself. And Lisandro Alonso and Caetano, and she was having this reflection that for me was very interesting, that she said that I might misquote her, but I think that the central idea would be there, that there was something about filmmakers trying to find their own voices, literally the voices of how people talk about what is the voices that they have in their minds. Might not be the same the ones that they talk, but there's something about oral culture that seems to be part of what makes Argentine cinema what it is. And the research is that each filmmaker, how do they talk? So we go to non-actors because we want to have another way of speech. We want to the stories that our grandparents told us, and myth, and like folk stories and like gossip, that's that from not the urban, not from the cities, but from the outskirts and from other provinces, the way that they talk, how they express themselves. There's something about the mise-en-scène that is connected to the voices and speech, or silence in the case of Alonso. That is then, and in my case it was maybe closer to Martin Rechman or Juan Villegas. That is composition, words, speech is composed, speech is masks, speech is an artifice. So theater comes in my case, no? But we can see that also in previous filmmakers like Hugo Santiago, no, that literature was a big thing in the way that nothing was natural. No, I think that when I was older, I was reacting against the idea of naturalism in Argentine cinema, and that I was not feeling close to silence, nor to, I could admire what other filmmakers were doing, but I didn't feel it myself, to work with like natural speech or with silence or with other, and I have to find it myself. And it was not by myself, but it was with this connection with theater and with this community and with these people and this theater, and like going to the theater a lot, meeting people, having relationships, having life going through me, building friendships that are very strong, friendships that you know about this, because Cinema Tropical is also coming from a bond of friendship, that it's a double responsibility, because if you get mad with your coworker, you're also getting mad with your friend. So sometimes I know that I talk about friendship and colleagues and so on, and it seems kind of hippie, but no, actually it's a double responsibility, because if you have just a contract, like a labor contract, it's very easy to break it somehow. But here there's another responsibilities, other challenges that are mixed. So theater, yeah, and voices, and trying to, I was attracted to filmmakers that were working that way. Hitchcock was working all the time with the same actors. Fassbinder was working all the time with the same actors. Speech was a thing with Chantal Ackerman. Like that many, like that many. Eric Romer was important in terms of like, people talking is also part of cinema. It's not that it's anti-cinema. Okay, and there's a classical structure, but at the same time there's an interest to see the world and a documentary thing, and there's a production mode that is different from the other scale, I don't know, or even again Alejo Moishansky or Marino Ginás with the idea of another, like a super production that is like small, like huge scale but small production, I don't know, an imagination and like nurturing from that, trying to break things a little bit instead of just like being condescending and official. Can
you tell us a little bit how you're working more specifically with this group of actors? You were mentioning how you work, write, shoot, edit.
Yes.
How much group creativity there is? How you specifically work with them?
Each time I think that more. Each film is different, even though there's look-alike, each process is different. And ever since I moved to New York and haven't been like in touch so regularly, things have changed a little bit. So what I feel that has happened, that every time I have less time to write the script, and every time I'm writing the script on like the last night, but that was the case of Isabela. Isabela doesn't have a script, but I've written things. Everything has been written, maybe just before the shot, but it has been written. It was not improvised. The things that were more improvised are the ones that are connected with the rehearsals. No, you're not going to fake a rehearsals. No, what's the need of like, here you have to make as if you make a mistake. If you think about the situation, the actors will make a mistake. It's part of doing a rehearsal, So let's unite the useful and the good. So work. I wish I could rehearse more, every time, but I lose that. In They All Lie, I really like how we did it. It was like 3 months of rehearsals, and I was meeting, and they were the actors were very generous with their time, and we were going to the house and rehearsing during the weekends, and I was writing and rewriting the scenes. It was very interesting to live in that state, you know, like, and each time I had less time, but it's true that also we knew each other more and more. So now the code is built. The way that we know that we work together is built, it's games, so we can go right at it. No, so the muscles have been trained, the muscles know how to react. So now the idea would be how not to become robotic, how not to become sterile, how to keep on challenging ourselves, and keep on expanding. But the relationship is of trust. Theater gives us this idea of building a bond, like a pact of, like, you know, when you do theater, I only did it once, but I only did it once, and there's a big pact, you know, that you have to meet every week to do this ritual, this thing, this meeting. And I remember once when we were doing with Gaby Saidon, Elisa Carricajo, Laura Paredes, y Agustina Muñoz, a little theater play that is somehow the core of the Shakespeareans, these films of Shakespeare, that one day I needed to travel to something that I was, and I just said, oh, I'm going to cancel and say that someone is sick, you know. And when and then someone called me and said, Matías, you cannot do that. There's a pact of, you cannot name my name or like say that this is like that because you're not here, that we cancel the show. No, it has to keep on, and if you cannot be here, the thing will go on, or you have to stay also, you know, or you have to take some sort of responsibility. So there is this very strong, and it was a very interesting learning thing, you know, this pact to be responsible and faithful to that pact of community. Even if it's like a super small thing, a group of 4 or 5 people, but understand what's important in that sense. So the connection with theater has to do with that, and work is like that, trying to meet, trying to do, trying to change, trying to listen, you know, and trying to do differently each time.
Sure. You know, you're talking about rehearsing, and I personally think that's, I admire that a lot about your work, and you, in a sense that you're also kind of challenging the idea of the masterpiece of this idea of perfection cinema, that a film has to be perfect and everything has to be tied, starting from that, having a very sort of a screenplay that ties everything together, and the characters go to or the character goes to a you know, a whole transformation, and a kind of, but you know, but your films in that sense, they feel more like a dress rehearsal, and that's what's make it so playful and lively and engaging. So I'm also, you know, you mentioned rehearsal in terms of theater and how you work, but also I think also kind of mirrors your work in itself, and also you were saying that you make connection between
one and the other.
So it seems part of a larger rehearsal of some sort.
It's very it's an ongoing thing. Yeah, the idea of the masterpiece, the idea of like perfection. There's a very beautiful text from a Cuban writer and filmmaker about imperfect cinema, no, like a praise for imperfect cinema, and that is very interesting. Or Glauber Rocha, no, talking about the aesthetic of hunger, and no, and learning different ways, no, and I think that is very oppressive when a film wants to be perfect, or what is a perfect image, what is perfect. Those ideas, we need to put them aside, and they're not vital, no, they're oppressive. They put us into patterns, and I think that sometimes cinema becomes a little bit preachy, you know, like a little bit. And my experience of life is one that is a little more like in depth. How to say, submerged in uncertainty. Look at these years that we're living now. No, nothing makes a little bit of sense, and things are a little bit like more like arbitrary and moving. So I try to keep that sense of movement in my movies. I think I like the idea that things are not going to like be perfect, or like the plot will be like, but things are going to keep us a little bit open, will be welcoming uncertainty. Also, I know that I make films about very small subjects, and I like that. I think that is very weird that I pretend to make like a statement to the world. I'm not Cecil B. DeMille. I don't want to be that. I don't know. I feel very uncomfortable when they want to sell me that, you know, and I feel that it's very far from my experience and my experience of living, no, how we live our lives, that we don't know things. And so yeah, I don't like to be a filmmaker that thinks itself as a master. No, we actually have to like maybe think about again and deconstruct the idea of masterpiece. If there's a master, there's a slave. So I don't know. Maybe we need to think about that. You know, it's weird. And so no, and I like there's something horizontal there in the movies. You might like one better than the other one. I love when that happens. You don't need to. I actually like when people say, "Oh, I like this one, and I like that one. I like this." Perfect. You know, you have to own them as an audience. Own the movie. You know, I don't want to be explaining to you things and treating you as someone that doesn't know or what, you know. I'm offering a lot of stimuli, and I know that sometimes the movies are going too fast or this and that, but then it's because I think that rhythm is very much part of rhythm and movement is very part of the experience of going to the movies. And sorry, I'm rambling a little bit, but
no, I mean that's perfect. Precisely, this is the space to cross ideas. Another key person in your filmography has been your cinematographer, Fernando Loquet. Yes. And he's shot all of your films, right?
Yes, not now. Now that has been broken because the short film has been shot by other filmmaker from Spain, Mauro Erce, but at the same time, that's okay. I don't know. At first, I was very sad about that. Mauro was very good himself, but I cherished that family and I miss them, and I was missing them in the shooting, even though I was appreciating working with someone else. And yeah, there's a bond, there's something, and there's a connection, there's trust. Those trust is so much, you know, it's everything that. So yeah, but then again, things shouldn't be rigid, and that doesn't mean that we're not going to work in the next and this and that. And yeah, things should have always this movement and dialectical way of being. So yes, but with him, we met in film school, and I have made almost everything with him, and it's part of making a movie, and he has he's a very like formal way of thinking, but at the same time always challenging. He's not rigid. He's always pushing me to think differently, and he has a strong connection also with the actors. Work together. It's not when you see the movies, the person that is looking through the camera is not myself, it's not me, it's Fernando. So this interaction between these people is also there's a triangle there. It's not me and Maria, it's me, Fernando, and Maria, you know. There is a bond there that is very strong, and that the films also nurture from that. So yes, Fernando is a vital piece of a vital person, not a piece, a vital person of this process.
And of constructing your universes. No, what I also find very interesting about the use of the camera in your films is that it's very sober and elegant, and at the same time playful, but at the same time it's very functional. It never really draws attention to itself. So it's kind of a perfect combination of it's completely in tune with the work of the actors and the scene. So I find really interesting the use of the camera in your films.
That's the connection between all of us. No, there's something for me that the shot is magnetized. That when it's good is when the magnets. No, I usually feel that the sides of the frame are magnetized and the people inside also are magnets. So when it's good, the shot is when everything is like in a sort of tension, not repelling each other, not sticking to each other, but in a state of like suspension. I don't know. I think that it's something that we do with this triad, this trinity of the camera, myself, and the actors, that produce this movement, this sense of movement that I feel and I want and I push for. No, there is some. It's like juggling. Also, if you juggle too slow, the balls will fall. You need to juggle in a certain sort of movement, and it's a little bit aerobic. So sometimes I feel of my shots like that, the camera movement here, and when they get in and when they go out, and when someone calls and when they turn, and the frame. For me, the frame is very important. I like framing. There's something attractive in how you cut space. And for me, that's what makes fiction also. You know, it's not like I tend to cut, I tend to be close, but not that close, showing the space in a particular way. And Fernando knows that. Fernando can work very differently as well, and with other filmmakers works very differently. But he knows the mindset and the vision that we create together. That is not mine only. It's not only mine. It's not that it's my thing. It's this sort of combination of the group of people that are there. That the strongest ones are him, myself, and the actors. But then there's also the sound person, and of course the editing, and of course the production that are also making the film possible as it is. But they're a little more invisible in some cases. No, it's hard to see the influence of the assistant director. But the assistant director is also a very important part of the process, and also has been repeated many times. No, in my case, if you say Lionel Braverman or Alejo Francetti, I don't know, people that are very close to me as well. And they're also filmmakers. So yeah, it's a little bit abstract, but at the same time, it's very simple. There's no magic. It's, yeah, just process.
In Buenos Aires, the city,
yes,
plays an important role in your films, in most of them. What is your personal and professional relationship with the city?
Well, I like to show the places that I go through. And this goes back to this idea of like the movies being very attached to my biography. This theater comes in because I became attached to theater, or to these people in theater. So I did a movie in New York because I moved to New York. I didn't do it because it was, I don't know, you know, I suddenly made a movie in Portugal because all of a sudden the Iberic Peninsula was doing something to me, you know, also. So my movies are very attached to my biography. It seems a little bit selfish and self-centered, but I try to do something with that. So Buenos Aires, I like to show it in a particular way. I like to think of movies as maps. I don't like to go to the cliches. You don't need to see the obelisk to understand that you're in Buenos Aires. And of course, if you think it's not that you can, like people that are going to look for like a sightseeing experience in my films in Buenos Aires or in my film in New York are not going to get that. Because I like to approach it in a more humane way. I think that the postcard is very oppressive as well. So to expand the possibilities of what New York is, I don't need to write a scene in a yellow cab in order to especially now that we take Ubers, no, but or what Lyfts or many other ones. So the yellow cabs are going to enter the frame no matter what. And that would show that it's New York. Or I would rather focus on one particularly subway station, or on the walls, or in the floor. I don't know. I prefer to be very focused on a small thing, rather to give like a big image of the city, you know. And so Buenos Aires also entered like that. It's a certain neighborhood. I shot during Viola, I shot in the neighborhoods that I was going through those days. And I'm connecting the houses of my friends. One of the houses is Alejo Moishansky's, and the other one is Pablo Sigal's, that is another of the actors, and the other one is from Alberto Ajaca, the theater that he had. It's all these resources of friendship and trust, and that somehow make a map. But I try to be realist to it, no? I try to follow how it is when Viola goes through the city with her bike. It's very clear where she goes and how she goes from one place to the other one. You can put it in a map. And so I like that. Again, it's like avoiding the blank page. Why should I be imaginative when I have a city that has a structure and a way of behaving? And again, and at the same time, the movies are not about urbanism. You don't see a lot of Buenos Aires, but you get something. Maybe the one that is more like that is The Stolen Man, because this connection with the 19th century history, and I was going back to the places that are still like that. So maybe in The Stolen Man, yes, you can see a little bit more of Buenos Aires, and like a sort of like an intervention of contemporary city through the ruins of the 19th century, you know, and like we are mixed there. then they all lie. It's how do you say, annulating the city. It's a fantasy world. It's a bubble in a sense. And Rosalinda also, it's a little bubble in the delta, you know. And then Viola has a little bit more, but not much. Usually the city doesn't show that much. But then if you know that corner where I shot, that corner, I will exhaust it. And so if you know that corner, it's a lot, you know. And I think that in New York happens the same. In Herman Helena, that happens the same. That you might, if you know that corner, if you know that place, if you know that park, Columbus Park, it hits the double. But then it's not the typical. I hope that it's not the typical portrait of New York. So I try to do the same with Buenos Aires.
You're mentioning New York, and just looking back in retrospective, actually, I met you at that screening of Modern Mondays at the Museum of Modern Art. Was 2010 probably? The film was 2009, no? And then
it was super important.
George Siegel, who's a programmer at MoMA, good friend of both.
Yes.
He saw the film. He was a jury at San Fic, and then he loved the film. He programmed for this series, Modern Mondays.
Modern Mondays.
And you came to present the film, and actually that's where I met you.
Yeah.
And that screening had a big impact in your life, and
everything. It was everything. It was everything. That Josh Siegel did a lot for me. He's like my godfather in New York, and he did like a lot of things, and he's so very generous, and always with me he has been like very helping me a lot to make, you know, to keep on moving and to keep on exploring things. And that particular screening, yes, it made me come to New York. I just met my husband Herman then, and we were like kind of like starting to see each other. I was not willing to go to New York. I was not how to say, thinking about moving outside from Buenos Aires, because that's where I was making my movies. So if I would leave Buenos Aires, I would leave my movie making, no? And so, but then, okay, lab does those things, and all of a sudden, and it was then in that, when I was screening Viola, no, sorry, They All Lie, we were having a drink with Josh, and Josh told me about the Radcliffe Institute Fellowship. And I had some projects, and I told him, oh, you should apply, he said. And I was never applying to anything, and I was doing my own small little movies, so I was not interested back then. But then the relationship with Herman grew, and all of a sudden, Herman went to New York to do his PhD in NYU, and then all of a sudden we remember the Josh and he's coming about my projects and the Radcliffe Institute. So I apply, and I was very, very fortunate to get there, and that opened this relationship with the US, and particularly with New York. That at first, again, I was thinking that going to New York was living differently. Living Buenos Aires would be to live myself as a filmmaker. Maybe I was a little bit dramatic on that point. But then it's interesting how the unexpected occurs. You put yourself in another context, and new things start to happen. I remember that when I first moved, or the first ideas about moving beyond the lab thing, was always, okay, I did Rosalinda. Actually, when I was showing the They All Lie in Modern Mondays, after New York, I was going to Korea to show Rosalinda. So it was okay. I already did like 3 movies. So are we going to repeat? Let's find new ways. So in that sense, moving from Buenos Aires and going to New York was okay. Let's experience things differently. And when I actually moved to New York and to Cambridge also, I shot Viola. In between the moment of the decision and the actual moving, I did this theater play that I mentioned before and appears in Viola, and I shot Viola. And I took the hard drive with all the material to the Radcliffe Institute, and I left it there to sleep until one day I say, hey, wait, I have a movie here. At first I thought that it was going to be like a short film or something like that. And then I studied editing in Cambridge, in Radcliffe Institute. And that when I finished that movie, and all of a sudden it was like a sort of featurette, like a short feature, being New York allowed me to meet people that if I would have stayed in Buenos Aires, I wouldn't have met. And this is good and bad, no? But somehow I met through Josh, Andrea Picard, for instance, from Toronto, and I wouldn't have thought that Toronto would be interested in my movies because of how it's more like bigger movies, the market and all those things. And all of a sudden, it was very interesting that Andrea in Wavelength, that merged with Visions, allow for these more alternative movies to exist and to have a place even in the market. Because when I actually went and premiered Viola in Wavelength, I got US distribution. So it's not that I was just like going there and showing for my friends at the cinephiles. Actually, it allowed the movie to show in Canada, show in the US, and expand. So even though the movie was 62 minutes long, it's a little bit like alternative and this and that. It plays with Shakespeare in Spanish and la la la. And they talk a lot. All these things that someone that is doing a focus group thing of marketing might think, okay, throw this movie to hell. It found a place. It found a place. It found a place and a circulation, and it allowed for a new movie to happen. You know, so alternatives. It's not. If not, it's very suffocating. You know, and then New York helped me to expand, to find other places that if I would have stayed in Buenos Aires, I wouldn't have met these other people that are looking for more alternative things, alternative ways of putting films in the market or making circulation. You know, I like the idea of, sure. I mentioned, even when I mentioned the idea of how I'm making my shots, I talk about movement. When we are thinking about distribution, we can also think about movement. We need the thing to move. I don't need to screen in 20 cinemas. I know that I'm not for that, but I can have like one and I stay there, or two, and then to another city, and then to a cinematheque, and then here, like something that is a little bit more like the way that we distribute is similar and has echoes to the way that we produce. I think that it's weird when those things are not in the same tone. You know, that I'm shouting here and then you're shouting there. They need to be the same path, you know, the same sort of stepping, the same sort of movement. And so I appreciated that from New York, I was able to all of a sudden like screen my movies even in Japan. I have a friend, Chishiro Usui, that she's a programmer in the Japan National Center now. That she watched my movies and she decided to every time that I have a new movie, she takes me to Japan and I show my movies there in perspective in very nice theaters, and I do talks. It's something that she takes very beautiful care, very informal but very professional, you know, very informal but with a lot of love and attention. So everything is very neat and very proper and very like, I know who would have thought that I was going to be able to show in this context. And then I also show my movies in Cineteca in Mexico, which is amazing, like an amazing place. It's so important that these places exist, you know, so that I, all of a sudden They All Lie was a success. And when I show Viola, and this is funny, and this is something that the director of the Cineteca Mexicana always mentions when we meet, is that when we did the premiere of Viola that comes after They All Lie, they put in the poster from the director of They All Lie, which is ridiculous. I'm not a commercial filmmaker, but it was very funny that because the movie They All Lie was surprisingly good in terms of the audience, that they put that in the poster. No, so it's interesting to create these little monsters. Live life in the creation of little hybrids and monsters and things that can have different ways of being, and that patterns that are more uncertain, and but that they allow you to exist, you know, and it's very oppressive if not. And so I appreciate and I thank, and same thing with the Lincoln Center and Dennis Lim and Florence and all the people that are working there and allowing me to show my films at the New York Film Festival, which is crazy. And it's amazing, and gives like my Princess of France was able to screen in this beautiful Walter Reed cinema next to other works of other filmmakers that are way much well known than I am. And this idea that the names, it's not hierarchies. We need to like bring new people and move, and then one day I will have also to move away, but movement. I feel that the connections that I have been making had to do with people that are interested in the sort of movement, if not of breaking hierarchies, in exposing audiences to other sort of things. And New York City should be a city and a community that is looking for that and actually asking for more of that, you know?
Sure. I mean, in that sense, where you say that there's different angles. One of them is, I think you should be a case study in the US of how to create a sustainable and successful film career, in the sense that, you know, what we call as the industry, you know, like the modes of production are so difficult here. What I see, and if you agree, what happens in the US is that what happened in Latin America 25 years ago, that the access to funds was so limited that the filmmakers would have to make a successful commercially or artistically film in order to aspire to make a second film. Making a career in the US is so difficult. The opposite of Latin America, you know, and you're a great case of that. Independently of what happens to each of the films, you can continue making the films that you want. So I think I think you can certainly be a case study, but also because you managed to create a very, of course, a unique universe with with very low budget films, or considered very low budget films, particularly in the US. So, but at the same time, you're paying your cast. You create a system that works, that is sustainable, that I think is pretty innovative in the US.
It's always perfectible. You can always make it better. I always try to make it better, and I have like the assistance of my producers and people that have been like helped so much, like the filmmaker Jerónimo Rodriguez and Jake Perling, programmer Jake Perling, have helped me to create and move the films forward. And so it's this bond of trust and friendship that makes the thing sustainable. You know, it's because we're making these things because we want to, that makes it happen. And at the same time, you try to not abuse. You try to keep the things like in movement, and like you know, you try to keep like a sustainable universe where things flow, and one film helps each one in different ways, and that you care, and that you I don't know, it's very. I think that I have avoided making a movie in the US system, even though I shot in New York. I don't feel that Hermia and Helena is a film that would relate to the US way of making movies, or at least, I don't know, there's many ways of making movies though, but in the US, but I wouldn't know that much from US. There's this sort of private investor, you know, it's different, and yes, it's different. I'm very interested in the filmmakers that are more experimental in the US. You know, I'm more attached to those, to that tradition, to the tradition more connected to documentary and experimental work rather than fiction. But because I think that, you have Hollywood there, you know, and that's a big machinery that even if, I think that there's filmmakers that do a film like The Stolen Man, and in the second feature, if you put like a famous person, you can make like a film that could aspire to no matter what award or what level of exposure and fame and this, and an industry that, I don't know, sometimes I feel that can be problematic, or I don't know, I'm not an expert. I'm not, I cannot talk that much because I don't know much about it. I love to hear people talking about it. I have like friends that work there that have very talented people that make like wonderful films, or very interesting films. I don't know, I work at Pratt, and there I have like colleagues such as Jim Finn and Eliza Hittman. Very different sort of filmmaking mindsets, but very interesting in both. They're like amazing, and it's people that I learned so much from listening to their experiences and learning, and both of them are very, how to say, very clear in their visions, and very challenging, and very I say moving forward. I don't know, they're very different from me, and they are US filmmakers, you know, so I don't know. It's hard to be an American, a US filmmaker, un director estadounidense.
And the other aspect is commercialization. That you were saying that it mirrors your modes of production. That as far as I know, you've never worked with a sales agent. You're creating with a wonderful work that you do with Melanie Shapiro, with your producer, that you've been able to detect directly the distributors, with the festivals, that you create a community of.
We created, yes, exactly. We did it ourselves. What a sales agent might provide is all this network of connections that we, because of our life, our way of producing movies. I think that we come from a little bit of failure in a good sense. No, we lost the battle in a way. So everything that comes in is a winning. So so all of a sudden we are one movie goes to 3 places that people would consider like a flop, a mistake. No, but then we were able to make a second one, and that second one went to 11 places, and then the next one. So it's little by little that you grow the community. Your films are able to be seen, and people start like hearing about them. In that sense, New York was a resonance box. Helped me a lot in that sense. And all of a sudden, I'm able to show the films in Spain, thanks to No Cinema in Barcelona, that make all these connections around Spain. I'm able to show with Interior 13 my films in Mexico. I'm able to show my films in Buenos Aires. I'm able to show my films even in Japan. Of course, they're not like 7 months in the theater, in the multiplex. No, of course not. These are little places, but the people that want to see them can see them. And then US at the same time, So each time you win like a territory, you expand to a territory. There's territories that are harder. Like, I don't know, France is a big mystery for me. But I'm into conversations to screen like Isabela, and I'm hopeful that I understand that some places are harder or are in a system that is less the one that I live in. But one film at a time. I believe in this sort of like small and how to say, like green growth, and not just like throwing the movies. And I think that is very important with Melanie, that we take care of the movies ourselves and expand like little like ants, but like strongly. It's like few steps, but strong steps. And that allows the movies to keep on making. I remember that after Viola, that was screened in the US and in some other places. When I went back to Buenos Aires, people wanted to work in the next film. There was this idea that there was not sort of, this was never a success or nothing. It was just the movement that you do something and it shows, that we have the privilege of showing, that we do something and someone is looking and someone gives you the opportunity of a screen. So that's a lot. And you do that work and it's screen and it moves and it creates something that we might not fully govern, but that might produce something, someone will call you to do something, someone will say something, someone will ask you to do something. I don't know, movement. I think that it's important that the work that we do produces echoes and movement.
Along the same lines, you mentioned you're an Argentine director living in New York, working with Shakespeare.
Yeah.
So you also, I think, challenge the notion of Latin American cinema on one hand, but also I think you're also challenging the idea of the auteur, and the whole machinery process with festivals. Even though, of course, you've been validated and you've been successful, but I feel you're an outsider, or you made your career independently from all that machinery. So I'm really intrigued in both things, the validation of Latin American cinema and how you've navigated, but also how to create your own world, your own cinematic world without, and let me bring a third element, which we've talked about all through this conversation, that you're about creating communities. You're a very generous director, and you like creating communities, which is also kind of sometimes at odds with the idea of the geniality, the ego of the single author. So, I mean, I'm probably like very 3 different elements, but the idea of Latin American cinema, how it gets validated, and authorism, and how you see it with your own work?
Yeah, I come from a learning or from the author world, no, that we come from studying the cases of the cinemas in the 60s, whether in Latin America or in Europe and the US. So I don't know, I can understand that it's very director centric what I do also, and I understand that I'm very much a part of the, like a big part of the machinery that makes the thing. But then I also feel that because of that consciousness, this awareness, that I need to step back. And it's this thing that I mentioned, oh, if it's only me, it will be flat. If it's only Shakespeare, it will be rigid. But it's more about mix, putting things together and like merging. And so it's Shakespeare, but in Argentine, in Argentino, Pechos Rechonchos, and in Buenos Aires, but then New York. That things are a little bit messier and a little bit and more like a joy of mixing things, of mixture, understanding that life is that sort of mixture. So in that sort of mixture, you need to get blurred. But at the same time, I know that I'm very strong in my decisions and that I won't do that. So I don't feel that I'm like the idea of that I deny the idea of authorship by disappearing. No, but then I hope to be curious in regard to the things that I decide to work with, whether it's Shakespeare or the people that I work with. So I try, because I know that I'm a little bit stubborn, I know that I need to listen every time better. And sometimes that I usually say, and that it helps me, is to think that this movie is something that is not inside of me. It's not me. It's an object that is outside of me, and that I can see from outside, and that I just need to learn the logic that it has. Of course, that I put certain patterns of myself, but then it's not that I'm digitizing it. There's a lot of things that are beyond my control, and that I'm actually using and surfing with them in order to produce the actual results of the movie. And I think that the best moments of my films are those in which I lost a little bit of control, and so it's a tension, because I do come from a learning thing of like control and author and so on. But then I know that it's in the interaction and in the mixing where the important things happen. So I'm keep making movies about the same topics, because I think that I keep on researching and trying to find more of that. So that's why it's an ongoing thing that I want to keep playing this game of hazard and control, and then I admire the people that I work with, so I don't feel like pushing that much. And I feel that it's a little bit boring. I know that I become weaker also if I step harder, because you become oppressive. And so it's more in the exchange, in the mixing, in the mixture, that I think that things are better and more of a learning experience for everyone, and a surprising experience to make a movie without knowing exactly how it will be. Isabella was very much like that. And I like how it's Isabella, and I like how it is. And then we'll make another movie that is different. I don't need to cram on it and like be like you're drinking the blood of the movies because they're successful or not. I don't know. I'm a little bit all over the place, but I don't know. It's weird, because for me, I do know that I put a lot in the movies. So, but at the same time, I know that also I need, the best moments are those in which I lost a little control.
So you mentioned that's the case with Isabella, and also you go to, I would say, darker places, or darker feelings of the characters, like Envy, for example.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little more about Isabella specifically compared to the previous films?
Yeah. Well, Isabella, I remember once having a conversation with a friend, like the husband of a friend of mine, that my friend is Laura Petreca, and his husband is Obioma. and he knows a lot about Shakespeare. He's an academic that has worked on Shakespeare. And once talking, he told me that there's a moment in Shakespeare's that he got tired of the lightness of the comedies, and his comedies start being darker. No, and he mentioned Measure for Measure as a case. This was way back then. I think that I haven't even done Princess of France when and then I connected also with my life growing older. No, while you grow older, it's not that you become darker, but there's more complex. Maybe you understand a certain complexity in life, and that you can cherish that complexity. And I think that I also moved towards that, towards an understanding of things that could be, a complexity that could allow a darker side to enter, not to make it oppressive in a way or make it simple. Or so when I chose Measure for Measure, it also had to do with a will of changing moods. No, after making with a very light comedy like Love, Slavers Lost, or Midsummer's Night Dream, the change of tone. This thing that I make a film in reaction to the previous one. I work with a light comedy and light and I like comedy. Let's go to the opposite. No, let's go to a dark one. There's a couple of those. I prefer Measure for Measure because I have a stronger connection with it, and I thought that I could do something with it, and so I did. So it allowed, yes, also this thing that we're older and we have some other like bruises. That's why the color purple. The color purple is the color of bruises. So the color purple is important in Isabella. It's a pattern, it's a motif that appears. So it had to do with a different sort of like a different a need for another tone, for a different sort of tone. Yeah. I am not connected directly to political things, but yes, in Argentina it was a time for neoliberalist presidency, like a horrible presidency. So I don't know if I could make like very cheerful movies while going through that, or Trump. I don't know. It's not a straightforward relationship, but there's something that, okay, let's get immersed a little bit in this tone, and at the same time the films don't leave the politics in a direct way. But I think that there's a connection, even though there's a connection.
And the film had its world premiere in February of 2020, just a few weeks before the world came to
few days before.
And so it played. It played in a big screen there, and then it played in a drive-in here in New York Film Festival. And has there been other public screenings of the film?
There has been public screenings, but I haven't attended them. Like in Vienna, it was shown in theaters, and in other places it was shown in theaters. But I'm trying to think. I don't know if I've been present to a public screen of Isabella, apart from the ones in Berlinale. So New York will be kind of the next. I was in the drive-in, which was in Sunset Park, which was an amazing experience. And I think that was a very nice thing that New York Film Festival did. And then I'm having the opportunity to show it in end of August in Lincoln Center. So Cinema Guild has acquired the movie, so the movie will show around. So we just need to be very patient.
It's going to be interesting how the film plays before and after the pandemic, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm curious to watching it again. Now that we're coming out of this.
Some people have said that it's a very pandemic movie because it's made with certain patterns that could make it possible during the pandemic. There's very few actors. There's a lot of like outside shots. I don't know. It's another conversation, but it was funny that there's a weird resonance.
Matías, you're probably one of the most cinephile filmmakers I know, if not the most.
There's a lot.
But you're always in film screenings here in New York City, and you also work as a programmer. So can you talk about how you combine also the cinephilia, the work as
Yes.
and your work as a programmer with your own work, with your own work as
Yes.
a director?
Well, for me, watching movies is, I'm not going to be very original. Other people in the 60s have said this, but watching movies is like making movies. It has been a school, it has been a pattern, it has been a way of relating to the world. So it's very embedded in me. So I need to watch movies, it's what I like, it's what I, you know, um, Jacques Rivet said that he needed to watch a lot of movies because if you watch 3,000 movies, you're not going to get influenced by 3,000 movies. If you only watch 5 movies, you're going to get influenced by those 5 movies. You know, and I like cinema, This is the discipline that I decided to live in, and I know that I can even live even further on. There's filmmakers that are very like Gina Terraroli or Ted Fenn or Graham Swan or Bingham Graham or many others are like huge cinephiles that are watching constantly and a lot of things. New York allow us to watch so many things and expand and thinking. It's so good to get your place in the world, and you say, oh, I thought that I watch a lot, and all of a sudden there's a full world to see, a lot of filmmakers that are obscure and that have not shown and that you are not aware of. And New York is a big center of the cinephile community, has allowed that, has allowed that the experience of the big screen, also cherishing the big screen, cherishing the ritual of moving to a place and go into a dark room with a lot of people for the experience of watching a movie. I don't know. I miss it. I know that it's not going away. And yes, these are other houses. It's your other, especially New York. That we live in small apartments, so we need to go to other small rooms like the cinemas, and then it's a learning experience. I used to program for Punto de Vista, this film festival of documentaries and experimental work that is very far from my filmmaking, but at the same time has nurtured me so much. For me, it was much more. I think that I said yes to program with Garbiñe Ortega, that was the director of Punto de Vista for the last 4 years. Now our tenure has concluded, so we're not there anymore. But if it would have been more of a fiction film festival, I might have said no because it was too close to me. So I usually like to be in contact with things that are not so close to me. At one point, I thought that Shakespeare was far away from me, and so I connected with him. And then I thought that theater was far away from me, and then I connected with it. Now some experimental cinema was far away from me, and now I'm connecting with it. So it's a way of expanding. So for me, it's very connected. Same thing with teaching, like being in touch with younger generations and this and that. It's putting yourself in another position, like putting hierarchies aside or tackling them down, thinking that it's a complex process still, but watching is very important. And then again, I'm a filmmaker. I know how beautiful it is to be given a screen. So how is it that I would not like to give a screen to others? What we do at Anthology, giving the opportunity. It took me quite some time to show in New York. I say that New York has been a resonance box for me, but I had to move in. It's so unfair. Not everyone can move to New York, and not everyone should move to New York. And all of a sudden, we found this gap, of films that were very interesting, but they were not being shown in certain places because those places were showing other work that also needed to be shown. But there's so much production and so much interest that we still need to give more screens. So the opportunity of providing a place to screen more for me is very important, because somehow I think of myself. It took like a lot of little coincidences for me to be able to screen. Viola, it's the movie that it's like my 4th movie, which is okay. I'm fine. I could wait. I can do my films, but then it's important that we were able to give like a screen to films that would never have been able to be shown. And I think that like covering that gap is very important. And so there's something there that for me is very, very interesting, and that it expands from me giving people a screen. I think it's a minimal thing that we can do, and that it's important that we do it.
Great. We have a question actually from the audience, from Nayibe Bermudez. You already referred to it, but very specifically, how how have you been able to make so many films when you were so young?
Well, I don't know how young I am anymore, but because the film school, the film school that somehow nested us, we're very young, technology moved forward, so it was more inexpensive to make films, and the university provided us the equipment and a group of people and a way of making films in a different way, and so it started. So with 24, 25 years old, I was surprised with my first feature because I was expecting to make a short film. So it's because of accidents and coincidence and circumstances and a context that I am thankful for, that the things start to move. And then, for instance, when I was going to make my second film, I wanted to make my second film very fast. I wanted, not very fast, but fast enough. I was seeing that I was not liking the second movies of many people. And I said, what is it? Because these people are very talented, and why is it that I don't like the second movies? Usually they took like 4 years to be made. And because there was a system there that they might be nice movies there, and not all second movies are bad. The Holy Girl is an amazing movie, but we're talking about Lucrecia Martel that she's quite amazing, no? But so don't take these words so general. This is just my particular and very narrow understanding of things. But the university and the people that I work with made possible that as soon as a little money came in, I could direct it to start making something, So it's this context and this possibility that allowed me to create this thing, and I was insistent. I insisted. I had clear that I wanted to make things apart from what I should be making, no, and that I had like a passion for trying to challenge how you can tell a story and how you can. So I was stubborn. That energy made me like persistent. And then I had the chance of finishing the movies because of the people that I work with, because of the institutions that I was close to, and lucky enough to bring the attention to some programmers and this and that. But then it's insistence also, no? There's an Argentine writer called Roberto Arlt that talks about the how to say prepotencia.
It's prepotence, I think.
Yeah, I don't know, prepotence of work. La prepotencia del trabajo. Because you didn't like this one. Okay, here comes the next one. And maybe they're very small, and it's not easy to make a movie, and it's not that you do it just like that, not at all, but insisting and nurturing the world that you believe, that you think that might work, and that you're passionate and a little blind to keep on making with the people that you're making. You're not blind to the people that you're making with, because that can bring problems, but like, I don't know. Yeah, like an insistence and a context.
So before we say goodbye, I'm running out of time. Can you tell us a little bit about your new film, your new short film, and your first direction?
Yeah,
exactly.
Of course. Finally, I made a short. So it seems that I'm better. I might be a better, because I think that I'm going to make a short, and it's actually a short, because in other opportunities, I think that I'm making a short and then they're like features. But the thing is that Sycorax is a film that comes out from a research that we want to make a film with Lois, a feature, and we got a little money to develop the script. And instead of like sitting down on that money to write a script, we decided to go to the island that we wanted to work in, that is the Azores Island in Portugal. So when we decided, okay, let's use this money not to just sit down in an apartment and write, but to go and do something. Let's go out there and do some images, and then go and all of a sudden we say, okay, if we're going, why won't we tell Agustina to come also? And why won't we do this? And then it becomes a movie. But this Sycorax is a film that is intended to find each other's common ground. Lois Patiño is a filmmaker from Galicia that is a documentary experimental filmmaker that is based on silence, stillness, and contemplation. And I work with Shakespeare, movement, and actors. So we're almost the opposite. And from being the opposite is that's attraction immediately, because I'm interested and I admire his work. And I think that he's interested also in the world that I can provide. So there's a very interesting synergy between us. And this short film was a first attempt to find a common ground. And I think, and to question ourselves, to question our positions of filmmakers, now that we are a little bit older and that we both made some work that could define us, let's use this opportunity of mixture to redefine us, to think about ourselves again. And so in that sense, the energy of this movie is very similar to the other ones for me, because I'm always trying to keep that, but in this case, it's more extreme. Because I shot in another country and I shot with other people and I shot in a co-direction. So there was a lot of new things, but I'm really happy with the result. I think that we found things, and I think that the movie is a movie on itself, that it's sustained on itself, and it's based on Sycorax. Sycorax is the mother of Caliban, so it's what Prospero calls the witch. And there's a very beautiful text by Silvia Federici. She's a thinker, a feminist thinker, that is rethinking the figure of Sycorax in relationship to capitalism. And what we're taking from her is this idea that Sycorax doesn't exist as a character in the play. She's just mentioned, and she's mentioned by Prospero. That is a man, like a European man. So it's very interesting to think that we know Sycorax as a witch because the white man has said that it's a witch, but maybe she's not a witch. Maybe she's something else. She's just like a different sort of woman, you know? And so with that little question, we go a little bit around trying to find the Sycorax in this island. And it was a very super interesting experience. It was very important, the editing process, with also a filmmaker, Jorge Jacom, that is a filmmaker from Portugal, and his input has been like also super important and like very, again, moving and making us question things. And the relationship also with Lois has been like good and interesting, and also the relationship with Agustina Munoz, that is one of the actresses that I work with. I don't know. It's again, biography merges with the filmmaking for the sake of questioning ourselves a little bit more and a little bit harder.
Very looking forward to seeing it, hopefully soon. And was that an exclusive that you were saying that Sycorax is your last Shakespeare and that you're gonna?
No, it's not. Ariel is the feature, because this is the short film that we did in order to make a feature. Oh, okay. So the feature, the last film will be Ariel. That's the main project that we have with Lois. But then this little other project was born, that is Sycorax. And of course, now history will make that Sycorax is an interesting movie and Ariel will be like bullshit. But we'll see. We're going to try to make Ariel like a very good, like the best movie that we can.
So, but you haven't shot Ariel, or what's the status?
No, we haven't. We were given a little money to develop it, and we decided to make a movie in order to develop the feature. But then these are very different movies. We actually thought about not burning ideas from the feature, and we use other ideas. But it was a way to understand our languages and find like a common ground. Okay. So next year we should be shooting Ariel, and at the same time I'm developing 2 projects that had Sappho as. Yeah, I'm moving from Shakespeare to Sappho.
And before we say goodbye, why Sappho particularly? How did you get into Sappho?
I got into Sappho through Pavese, Cesare Pavese, the Italian writer that has these dialogues that's called Dialogue with Leucot. And I was reading this book, Dialogues with Leucot, that the Straub and Vuillet filmmakers did a lot of adaptations of this movie, of this text, but they never did the one of Sappho. And the only one that I really connected with, these are like more than 20 dialogues, and I was liking the text, I was liking the book, but I was not truly connecting. But all of a sudden, these 4 pages appear, and I connected as I connected with Shakespeare and with Sarmiento and so on, and then and this dialogue is between Sappho and Brito Martis, and so Pavese is fictionalizing a dialogue with Sappho. From there, I started being curious about, okay, let's read about Sappho. So I started reading about Sappho through Anne Carson, the Canadian poet and scholar, that she's an expert in Sappho. And also an expert in not an expert, but she talks about also about Antonioni. And Antonioni worked with Pavese's text. And so there is all this circle of Sappho, Antonioni, Pavese, Anne Carson, Sappho. So I'm in the middle of that. And there's this sense of a fragmentation and disappearance and memory and how we reach to Sappho that is challenging me. It's making me have questions that I haven't solved. And I hope to dynamize these questions with movies. And I have 2 projects, one that is more connected to the Pavese text, and one that is more connected to the Sappho poems. I think that one is a feature, another one is a short film. One is more fiction, the other one is more documentary experimental. So I hope to be developing these movies very soon. I'm actually here in Porto doing a residency in writing, and actually today I started writing the script. I wrote my first 10 pages. I'm very proud.
Oh, wow.
Considering that I usually write the night before, I'm very proud that today I wrote 10 pages. So I want to state this so that it stays in the web for never.
Actually, we have one other question. Have you considered working with a living writer? Is that on the horizon?
It would be amazing. Yes, there's a living writer that I admire a lot, and that has been also my reading partner while I was making They All Lie. One was Shakespeare, and the other one is the Mexican-Peruvian writer Mario Velatin. And I love his literature, and for me, it would be a huge honor to do something with him. We sometimes said so. We'll see. It would be amazing to make a movie with him in no matter which way. His literature is something that attracts me in a very special way, and it's such a pleasure that I obtained from reading his text, all of his texts. There's something about, for instance, Flores, his novel that influenced the way that I decided to structure They All Lie, and the way that I decided to work in Isabela, my most recent movie, is very influenced, or at least I had it as a partner, the Mario Velatin's novel El Hombre Dinero, The Money Man. Mm-hmm. And these are things that are for my own process. It's not that you see it in the movie, but it's an inspiration, and it's a motivation, and it's something that, again, like this question that is never solved, and because you have that emptiness of no answer, that you keep on moving and you keep on making. So yes, Mario would be an amazing person to work with. And then also I work with other people that are also writers. Agustina Munoz is a writer, and Romina Paul is a writer. So it's not that we connect, like we did like a script together, but there are collaborators that we're very close. So yes, of course, I think that, maybe after Sappho, one of the reactions might be like, okay, come back home.
Great. Well, Matías, thank you so much.
No, thank you, Carlos, and congratulations on your 20 years. You're very young.
Not as young as you.
No, I say no. I'm not 20 years. Yeah.
And there's some plans that we'll hopefully make it public, and hopefully we can celebrate in person the 20th anniversary.
We will. In August, we'll be back in New York, and we'll be in Lincoln Center to open Isabela, and like see it in a big screen. That it was meant. If there's a movie of mine that was meant to be in a big screen, was the one that was caught up in a pandemic. But okay, there's much more important things to attend, and more things to take care of, and yeah.
but it's happening at the end. You know,
It's happening. Of course, we have to be patient. There's other more important things to take care of. So I don't.
But also, I
don't
think cinema it enriches from this time. So probably even the film will be even more timely than it was
yeah,
even a year ago. So
I'm not in pressure, and I think that the films are there. You know. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you to the audience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No,